gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? When you were 8 and you had bad traits, you go to school.
Good morning, everyone. It's Petty Officer Romero. Today, our subject, use of force. To me, very important things that you need to think about when you're out in the field, again, as a police officer. In the military, it's not really called use of force. It's called rules of engagement. Similar subject, but we'll touch on both of them. In security, again, use of force. A lot of times, and we'll start with security, a lot of times there's a company policy, and there is in the police department as well. There's a policy on what is acceptable use of force. There's a policy on how far you're allowed to go. I mean, in this day and age, you have tasers. You know, obviously you have your field weapon, you have batons, you have mace, you have all different types of force that you can use against a suspect or someone that you're trying to apprehend or control. The thing that you have to realize is that depending on the situation, you have to use good judgment. You cannot just go into that situation and immediately pull out your weapon to control a subject that really, that's unnecessary. And I'm sure that if you keep up with the news, you see different situations where police officers get in trouble for using excessive force. Now, before I get into all these things, I think it's also important that you guys understand that as a police officer, as a security guard, as even in the military, your safety is important. And I think that's what's lost many times when you see news reports about what a police officer did or how much force. You know, I could ask you guys the question: if you were making $40,000 or $50,000 a year as a police officer, are you required to put yourself, your life, your health in jeopardy because of a situation? Maybe you want to use less force just to appease the community, because the community, it seems, does not often look at the police officer's safety when they're criticizing. At the end of the day, I think it's most important, and most police departments understand this. The community doesn't always understand this, and the way that the news reports it, they obviously don't understand it. But if you're getting paid $40,000, $50,000 to be a police officer, you want to make sure that at the end of the day, you go home safe. So sometimes when you see these videos and there's 4 cops subduing a suspect or someone they're trying to apprehend, and it might look excessive because I think you're using the standard of, let's say, look at regular life. When someone gets in a fight and 4 people jump on one person, it's just pretty much considered unfair. When you're dealing with apprehending a subject, it's not about being fair. You want to be as unfair as possible. You want to take that suspect and you want to put him down, and you want to do it in a way where the opportunity for you to get hurt is as minimal as possible. So don't ever consider and don't ever worry about whether or not too many people, or if you being in some situations it might seem like you're being aggressive, but that's really what it takes. If you take the suspect down, if you tackle him in a way that he loses his wind and you're in a position where you can cuff him and put him away, that's perfectly acceptable. And again, there are 2 different ways of looking at it. You have the media and the community's way of looking at it. And this is where you get into politics, and it's important that you do things in a professional way. But at the same time, you going home to your family is the most important way. Now, we have to strike a balance. We have to find a way to make sure that we do things that it's not so excessive that you can get in trouble. Because there are times when police officers have been arrested and put in jail for excessive force or doing things that were unnecessary. Or there was recently a time where a cop was called out to, it was in the news recently, a cop was called out to a suspect to a house because the neighbors thought something fishy was going on. So as the police officers were walking through the yard. The people in the house didn't know why there were police officers there. And they got their gun because they saw some people walking around in their yard, right? And keep in mind, it is absolutely 100% legal to own a gun and use that gun to defend yourself, especially when there's prowlers on your property. Well, in this situation, the prowlers were police officers. Well, when the police officer looks in the window, they see a person with a gun. So they shoot the suspect, which, again, called a suspect, but is it a suspect or is it a homeowner saying, who's in my yard? I'm scared. And in this case, it was a woman who was playing games with her, I think, niece or nephew. And the cop ended up shooting her through the window. Now, if you depend on how you want to spin it, cop walks through the yard, person playing video games, and shoots him through the window. That's awful, right? But on the other hand, let's look at it another way. Cop called out, let's put you in a situation. Cop called out to a potential burglary at a particular house. They're walking through looking for this burglar. They're looking for this criminal. They look in the window and they see a person with a gun. Immediately, I just got finished telling you, you got to defend yourself, right? You want to defend yourself from someone with a weapon. Should you wait to see and make sure and ask questions, or if someone turns a gun on you, you shoot them? Well, in this situation, the cop shot him, and the people happened to be the residents of the house. And I mean, it was an absolute awful situation. But that's one of those situations where, to me, what could we have done differently? I get that the police are called out and that the police don't want, I don't know, maybe the policy of that particular police department is you don't want to, you want to go in there and apprehend somebody, or I don't know. But personally, I would say that the first corrective thing I would do is that I would come out with my lights on. I would come out with the sirens blowing, and I would let it be known that I'm a police officer and I'm on this property. So once you do that, now you're letting anyone in that property know. Now you can see the negative of this is you're announcing yourself. If it happens to be a criminal, do you want to announce yourself that you're there instead of having the element of surprise? So this is one of those hairy situations where training is necessary. You want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because this was a tragic situation that you don't want to see happen very often, or at all, ever, actually. So anyway, so there's a little bit of perspective, something that you want to consider. But let's look at some of these things from the book here. We talk about a formula for self-control, because this is an important situation. Self-control, you have to go into a situation, whether you're a security guard, whether you're a police officer, you have to go into a situation and have self-control. Let's forget about guns and weapons for a second. Let's talk about people who are going to behave poorly in the face of authority. And it happens every single day. People go into a situation where you're telling them, matter of fact, it could even be parking. You could be controlling parking. You can tell people, but you know what, where somebody might be used to parking over there and they're like, I always park over there in the grass, and you're telling them, no, you're not allowed to park there. You're going to have to go over here, sir. They don't like it. So you know what happens? They end up arguing with you. And so how are you going to handle that? Are you going to be aggressive with them? Are you going to start using foul language? Or are you going to try to use patience? And what you'll find out is if you're incapable of being patient, if you're incapable of being thoughtful and respond positively in the face of adversity, you might be in the wrong field, because you have to, in any one of these situations, respond professionally. Sir, I understand. You may have parked there in the past, but we have instructions. This is where everyone's parking, and I am not authorized to allow you to park in a different area. So I'm going to have to ask you to park in this area. And then when they keep arguing and fighting, at some point it escalates to the point where you call your supervisor. You say, I have a person here who just refuses to listen, and you take it up the chain of command. But in this situation, the last thing you want to do is respond because some guy's being a jerk, is respond the same way. So you have to demonstrate self-control. All right, so conflict resolution, same sort of thing that we talked about. You're going to want to be able to try to resolve a conflict with kindness, with showing people you have to be the bigger person. You have to show people that you're willing to back off. You're willing to not be aggressive, because sometimes I think people might go into situations thinking that they need to be more aggressive. I think they think that, I'm going to show him, I'm going to tell him and let him know. And then when you show them some respect and kindness, they tend to respond with the same. So I think that keep that in mind. Escalating and de-escalating a situation. Now, we talked about that. Same thing. Being respectful to someone can often de-escalate. Acknowledging their problem and understanding their problem, even though there's really nothing you can do about it. Saying to the person, listen, sir, I understand, and I can appreciate your frustration, but it's just out of my control. I cannot allow you to park over there, or else I'll lose my job or I'll get in trouble. So the fact of the matter is it's just not going to happen, but I do understand. And I appreciate it that you're accustomed to parking over there, or whatever it may be. You're used to using the back door. Sir, they are not allowing anyone to use the back door. And if someone was to call me and tell me that you're authorized to do that, I'll be happy to let you through. But my orders are to stop anyone from coming through the back door. All right. So then, response to aggressive behavior. Now, that's the same situation. We've talked about it. Is you have to stay calm. You cannot get upset, get frustrated, get aggravated when people start behaving poorly or abruptly, or even saying disrespectful things to you. At some point, I know we all want to do it, but you're in a field where you're not. I mean, I say a field. Look, you can be a customer service rep for AT&T selling phones, and if someone calls up and they're upset with you, and you decide to just let them know a little bit about themselves, you'll find yourself in the unemployment line. So once you get into a professional world, you're just not allowed to use that type of behavior. So I think that it's important for you guys to understand that and start accepting and getting used to it. Matter of fact, foul language. You just have to get to the point where if you just grew up in an environment where foul language is part of the way you grew up, you're going to have to find a way to get that habit out of your system. You just simply have to find a way to not let it slip or fly out, because those things will get you in trouble. And look, I'm trying to put it into perspective of not only getting a job, but keeping a job. Last thing you want to do is be bouncing around from job to job. You got a job with AT&T, then you got a job with security, and then you got a job. Boy, you finally got that break and you got a job in security, and you lost it because you just weren't able to keep those 4-letter words from flying out of your mouth. So let's keep that in mind. All right. Keep an optimal distance. Now, this is important because when you're in a conflict, you want to make sure that you have enough room to react. Okay. So we don't want to be on top of whoever we're dealing with at the time. We want to make sure that we are at a distance where if someone comes after you, you have the time to react. Okay. So let's keep that in mind. Anyway, safety issues. At the end of the day, we talked about it. You want to go home safe. You want to go home uninjured. You want to go home without conflict. I know when you're young, you think that you want to go out there and show some people what you're capable of. And as you get older, you start realizing the goal every day is not to go out and get into a conflict. It's to go out and avoid conflict. So if you can use conflict resolution, if you can use self-control, understand a little bit about the rules of engagement, about the company policy, those things will keep you out of trouble, and those things will keep you from having to get into situations where you end up, instead of going home at the end of the day, going to the hospital. Even if it's just something that's not major, you're not knocked unconscious, but if you get to a conflict and you end up rolling around with somebody and you hit your knee on the cement, you're going to have to go to the hospital. And instead of going home to taking care of your family, you're doing things that you don't want to do. So there you go. Use of force. The last thing you want to do is end up losing your job, or worse, getting sued or even arrested for excessive force. Keep that in mind. Solve your conflicts, be under control, and avoid escalating the situation where you end up irritating or making a situation worse by your attitude. You want to be the purveyor of peace. All right. So for Job Corps, this is Petty Officer Romero. Look forward to you guys watching the video and then also seeing the next video coming out tomorrow. All right. Thank you.
Tell me what you wanna do, what you gonna do. Yeah. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, what you gonna do?